when I talk about shallow political analysis, and this is what I really want to get to on this stream, because I'm going to talk about a lot of different Broadway shows, but, you know, a friend of mine, good friend of mine, was taking a class on Marxism at New York University, at NYU. And I asked him, what they were reading in his class called Marxism. I think it was called Marxism and Society, something like that. And I assumed they'd be reading the Communist Manifesto, the Poverty of Philosophy, the Critique of the Goethe Program. But no, that's not what they were reading. What they were reading in his class on Marxism and Society, they were reading novels. They read Dracula. And I said, why are you reading Dracula in your class on Marxism? And he said, well, we had a discussion about how Dracula is a parasite and he lives by sucking the blood of other people, and that's like a capitalist. And I heard that, and again, this is very surface level analysis. Very, very surface level analysis. Is it true? Yes, Dracula, vampires are parasites. They do exploit their victims, but you could say about any vampire book, any vampire movie. That's what it's going to be about. But if you read the Victorian novel Dracula, published by Bram Stoker, there is so much more there than just he's a parasite. And I don't think Bram Stoker intended for Dracula to be an analogy for capitalism. Dracula was written in the late 1800s when imperialism was in ascendancy. It was written by an Irishman, Bram Stoker, who worked in London, the capital of global imperialism at that time, the center of global imperialism. And he was a play producer. He worked in theater in London's theater district, and he had the idea to write this novel about a vampire, Dracula. So he wrote this novel, and Dracula has a lot to say about what's going on at that time. First things first, the most obvious thing on the surface is the Victorian era was an era of intense sexual repression, right? There was a huge public relations campaign back then telling people don't masturbate. There was a huge effort to contain women's sexuality, to crack down on anything that might be sexually appealing. It was a big part of British culture during that time. It was this really big, they were putting curtains over the piano legs because people thought the piano legs looked like human legs and they might turn somebody on. Huge, huge crackdown on sexuality. So Dracula is about as close as you can get to porn in that time, right? If you wrote erotic stories, they might throw you in jail because that was just utterly disgusting. But Dracula, you have beautiful women, beautiful young women who are sleeping in bed at night, and then this man breaks in and pricks them with his fangs. And if you look at what Dracula does in the novels, it's much more graphic than simply biting them. At one point, he's piercing holes in his chests and making the women suck the blood from it, obviously hinting at something else that people do, which I'm not going to get into detail about. But it's porn, and it's rape porn. It's sadomasochistic rape porn, right? He can't write a novel about a man breaking into women's apartments and raping them. So instead, he writes a novel about a vampire breaking into their apartments and biting them and forcing them to suck his blood in great detail. So there's that. On the surface level, it's very clearly about as close to pornography as you could get away with at that time. And people knew that at the time. It was considered to be very, very, very vulgar, right? On top of that, where is Dracula from? Dracula is from Romania, Transylvania, a region of Romania. And what was going on at that time? Eastern Europe was being colonized by the British. The British were exerting economic domination over Eastern European countries like Romania. And the idea, there was a lot of stereotyping of Russians, of Lithuanians, of Hungarians. People from Eastern Europe were considered to be barbarians. They were considered to be scary, monstrous, people. So Dracula, the way he's portrayed in the novel, is he's got a huge beard. He's got a beard. He's a wild, wild creature from Romania. And how does he get to Britain? he gets to Britain because Jonathan Harker, a British capitalist, is going over to Romania to buy up the land, right? He's an imperialist. He's coming in and dominating. It's the export of capital. Jonathan Harker, the real estate imperialist, the wealthy British capitalist, the gentleman, goes over to this uncivilized territory of Romania to purchase land and all of that. Ends up going to Castle Dracula. Dracula's this Romanian noble he's supposed to make a deal with. He doesn't realize he's a vampire. And Dracula uses his train tickets or whatever and gets back to Britain. So it's the fear of reverse colonialism, right? And this is what Nietzsche, this is the Marxist interpretation of Nietzsche. If you read George Lukács, right? It's the idea that as the, capitalism is entering its monopoly stage of imperialism, you see the pretenses of being civilized being stripped away. And the idea is the imperialists are becoming more and more ruthless. All of a sudden, they're committing atrocities that are horrendous. And the idea is that we're going over to the developing world and we're proving that we are the superior men. We're proving that we're the Übermenschen by engaging in cruel, barbaric activities. We're doing that, and the fear is that someone will turn around and do to us what we've done to them. That's the idea. So the idea is that as the British are colonizing and taking over and, putting economic domination over Eastern Europe, some kind of, brute, strong, scary, sexy man, with a beard, a big, strong Eastern European guy is going to come back to England and start breaking into the apartments of the women. And I mean, the whole thing is very, very loaded with political implications. And of course, what is Dracula afraid of? It's the cross, right? It's the cross. It's anything Christian is what he's terrified of. So it's like, with the crucifixes and the cross, with the Christian values, they're going to tame the beast, right? There's all kinds of politics in Dracula, right? It's sexual repression. It's colonization of Eastern Europe and the fear of reverse colonialism. The imperialists become bestial and fearing that people will do to them what they're doing to others. They're going to Eastern Europe and exploiting the people horrifically, et cetera. And they're fearing that somebody from Eastern Europe will come back. That's a really common theme in horror stories, et cetera. Plus, there's this longing for the good old days. It's almost like Charles Dickens, longing for the Christian values of the pre-capitalist era. Oh, can't we all just be nice? We can make the beast go away with our crosses and with our Bibles. That's what Dracula's about, right? It's very much, it's about the Victorian era. It's about capitalism moving into its imperialist monopoly stage. That's a deep analysis of Dracula. But if your Marxist analysis of Dracula is Dracula lives by sucking blood, he's a capitalist, that's just surface level. That's just surface level.